Shalom, my bitches. My Andis here at NFY bringing you part 2 of When Deathworlders Meet, by Andrew's second account. Night beasts, night stalkers, night terrors, the people of the night. Putting one in the same room as anyone, even a possible super soldier, meant sentencing him or her to death. Those nocturnal hunters were the stuff of nightmares and horror vids. Purely carnivorous, they could eat plant matter like any normal race, but they would become blind, start to wither away, and eventually die off without flesh to supplement it. They were small compared to most beings, but incredibly strong and moved faster than the eye could track. With a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, claws up to 8 centimeters long on their hands, and a kick powerful enough to take the head off the massive ice-walking Kent. They were near-perfect land predators. The night beasts hailed from Nyx, a high-gravity Class 11 death world far out on the northern galactic rim, and thankfully, not anywhere else. Calling them sentient was a matter of debate. They had no technology to monitor. No one had dared step foot on their world long enough to study them peacefully, and those that were taken by force tended to be less than cooperative. Indeed, no less than 3 ships had had their crews slaughtered to a being after poaching a live night beast. In 2 of the cases, where scans showed only the creature alive aboard, the ships were railgunned into oblivion just to be on the safe side. The insurance companies would have much rather written them off as a total loss than risked recovering them. The 3rd case had been different. The ship had been recovered in orbit around Nyx, with a single escape pod missing, and nothing but dead bodies aboard. Logs indicated that the creature had gotten loose when the ship was some 20,000 light-years away, warping space at full speed for its home port. Curiously, in order to make the ship reverse course, the emergency lockdown had to have been somehow overwritten and the ship's AI reprogrammed. That's not to say no study whatsoever had been done on the things. Solitary specimens had been killed, collected, and studied, but there was only so much a carcass could tell scientists. From the necropsies, they said their brains seemed capable of intelligent thought, but theory and practice were often very different. There was no way of knowing for sure, but AIs tasked with decrypting their language from 1 or 2 illicit probes seemed to think they were capable. But the recordings of the escape incidents on all 3 of the vessels played back nothing more than inarticulate screams of rage, untranslatable gibberish, and demands for intercourse. Intercourse this, intercourse that, intercourse you, and so on. Even as they tore throats out with their bare hands, and disemboweled stomachs with clawed bare feet. These were, of course, blatant mistranslations, despite AI protestations to the contrary. Since the most recent incident years ago, Antikatoon hadn't heard of anyone else illegally visiting the planet, let alone claiming one of the beasts. It could have been that they were simply successful and no one had heard about it, but he doubted it. Then 2 standard weeks ago, he and the crew of mostly willing servants had been offered more credits than he'd seen outside a lottery drawing for one of the monstrosities alive and in good condition. Having a veterinarian who couldn't refuse to work had been a gift from the 5 lords of heaven. He agreed to procure a night beast for a very noble buyer, a member of the idle rich, interested in exotic animals for his menagerie. The pay would be enormous, and included capture tools, medical equipment like tranquilizers, and a translator for his vet to implant, and retrofitting his ship to hold the thing before the venture had even begun. The translator was almost funny, were the thing not so expensive and hazardous to implant. The buyer had insisted that if worst came to worst, they should try to reason with it rather than kill it and lose what credits he had already invested. The easy part was acquiring it. It had been off on a solo night hunt somewhere in the plains of Nyx's broken surface when they found it. It only took one dart of the specially developed drug to tranquilize it. Though the tranquilizer was so powerful that it could have killed off his entire crew and his merchandise were it divided up evenly between them. The being had only 4 appendages, smooth skin with a soft lavender tone, and had covered itself in skins that weren't its own. A length of jet black fur swept back from where it was attached to the top of its head, and ran down to where its lower appendages met its torso. The 2 razor-sharp claws were present on its feet, each almost a decameter long, and a third, tiny vestigial claw on the outsides. Its 3 fingers on each hand were as blunt as any sentience. It was a large specimen for its kind, 175 centimeters, and incredibly dense with heavy muscle. 4 men had to carry it to the levitation pallet, and then on into its hardened composite cage, which itself was inside of a heavily reinforced cargo hold in the belly of the ship. So far, the creature had only killed 3 of his crewmen. As far as Captain Anticatoon was concerned, that was already an acceptable return on investment. Fewer people to share the prize, and he got to learn who among his men had been dumb enough to approach the docile-looking creature during feeding, despite being specifically told not to do so. He had hoped to limit the amount of flesh the thing consumed in order to keep it in a weakened state, but that wasn't going to happen now. It hadn't even finished with the first corpse before it killed another 2 crewmen. They had tried to pull their already dead friend from its cage. Instead, they only ended up joining him inside. How a 1.5 meter wide, 2.5 meter tall Toratoon male could fit between the 10-centimeter wide gaps in the bars was one of the mysteries of nature. It went to show that if one pulled hard enough, anything was possible. The captain wasn't worried. The night beast ate 3 meals per night cycle, as best he could tell. They would eventually recover all the wayward crewmen as it threw the finished bones from its cage. It had tried to kill a 4th and 5th time, but only managed to take a tentacle off one crewman and shatter another's upper hip. They hadn't gotten close. No, vid footage proved that. The thing had thrown the thigh bones of the consumed crewmen at their compatriots, with deadly force and accuracy. He hadn't known they could do that. Quick-witted observers erected a force field between the cage and the entrance to the hold, just in time to prevent lethal follow-up projectiles. Not once since it had been here had it done anything but roar and scream. He had tried to talk to it a few times, but got nowhere. His conversations always ended up the same way, with him having to blast it with cold water hard enough to kill a man just to shut it up. It rarely worked at first, but when he did it for long enough, it usually just ended up accepting its fate, silently gasping for air, half drowned in the corner of its cell as the water pounded on it. He didn't do it more than a few times. It's not that he felt sorry for it, or didn't feel like getting vengeance for his crew, although he could not care less. It was just that he had better things to do than torture a stupid beast. No, he would definitely not be putting this human anywhere within the reach of this thing. The snuff vids of the dismemberment would be valuable, sure, but perhaps not as valuable as a slave from an uncharted world. Those like Stivan were totally off record, with no one to come looking for them, and nowhere to escape to. Some of the less reputable slave buyers would pay top credit for the likes of him. That, and he didn't feel inclined to give the night beast yet another week's worth of hearty meals. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. Go ahead and put a comment down below if you have something you want to talk about. If you want to see more of my videos, go ahead and subscribe. And if you would like to have my video show up in your subscription feed, hit the bell icon on the side. Alright guys, have a nice one, y'alls.